Okay, we'll start with this quote from Lewis Carroll. "Begin at the beginning," the king said gravely, "and go on till you come to the end, then stop." I really wish it were that easy. When you first start writing on your very first book, or at least certainly that's the way it was for me, you don't really know what you don't know. So that's exactly what you do. You begin at the beginning and you just keep going and you write until you feel like you've come to the end and then you stop. But there really is a whole lot more to it than that. There's a certain expectation that readers have for story structure. So it really is worth knowing how stories are structured. Okay, so classic three-act structure has been around with us since the days of the ancient Greeks. Obviously, ancient Greek drama left its mark on us, and Aristotle, in his book Poetics, sort of codified three-act structure and wrote it all down for us. Over the years, that sort of evolved into a bit of a five-act structure, which is largely what I'm going to be discussing with you today. And a five-act structure was also codified and written down in The Technique of the Drama by Gustav Freitag in 1863. And we will look at his five-act structure in a short while. And then, of course, in more recent years, over the last century, we've had the influence of Hollywood. This has really opened up storytelling to all of us, and there is a certain structure that movies particularly follow, linked to drama, but that has now become so ingrained in all of us. I don't think there is anybody here who can say that they haven't been influenced in some way by the Hollywood films that they've seen. And this has resulted in a certain expectation by readers and viewers. We feel a bit lost if we don't have the structure that we're used to presented to us in a story. We just sometimes feel like the story is missing something. So we're going to look today at these different structures that are the original three-act structure, Gustav Freitag's five-act structure, and also how screenwriters approach screenwriting, because that definitely influences today how we write our novels. Okay, what is classic three-act structure? Well, very simply, it's a beginning, a middle, and an end, as I'm sure you were all taught back in high school. As I say, readers have certain expectations. If you do not follow this classic structure, if you don't have beginning, middle, and end, and you don't hit certain beats in the story, you don't deliver the emotional expectations that readers will expect. And I'm forever harping on about reader expectations. Those of you who've attended other webinars will know this as well. But I really can't emphasize enough that if you make a certain promise to the reader that you are going to deliver a certain kind of story, then you do need to deliver. Because if a reader loses trust in the author, you can actually lose them for the rest of your career. So understanding what readers expect is really, for me, a core value of being an author. Now, the amazing thing about following this kind of plot structure, it seems very technical. It's going to look very technical when I'm presenting it. But I want you to remember that the reason we have all these beats, the reason that we follow a certain structure in our stories is in order to create an emotional reaction in the reader. So that is the reason why we do all of this. And for those of you who attended my recent character arcs talk, this is based on character, not plot. We tend to think of story structure as being a plot, as being determined by the plot, or the plot is determined by the structure. But in fact, they are so closely interwoven. You will see as I present all these different methodologies of breaking down structure, how integral character is to all of this. And often character is actually more important than the plot. Because structure is effectively a journey of transformation for your main characters. Again, I'm not going to go too much into the transformation because that was covered in our character arcs webinar, the recording of which is available. And just to sort of repeat what I've just said, Robert McGee in his book Story says, we cannot ask which is more important, structure or character, because structure is character, character is structure. They're the same thing. And therefore, one cannot be more important than the other. Okay, I mentioned Gustav Freitag and his five-act structure. I'm sure this layout will be very familiar to all of you, or you may have seen it presented as a triangle with the triangle or the pyramid sort of evenly centered in the diagram. This one is a little bit more accurate for how the story is paced and the balance of the action. But effectively, in freitags pyramid, we have setup as the first stage, the first act, then rising action as the second act of the 5 acts, climax, then falling action, and then resolution. But as you will see, there's this huge, vast section of rising action in the middle, which can be very daunting for an author. So what we do is we break this down into even more steps. And looking at how this applies to 3-act structure, so there we've got freitags pyramid again in front of us. And if we look at it as acts, Act 1 would be, and you can see there are broken up, set up into exposition and inciting incident. I'll go more into detail in that shortly, but effectively exposition is setting up the world of your characters, introducing them to the reader, showing us what kind of ordinary world they live in. So for example, the exposition part of Harry Potter, the very first book, would be showing us his life in ordinary suburbia, the fact that he lives in the cupboard under the stairs, and the fact that odd things happen to him in his life occasionally, like going to the zoo and having the glass between him and the snake disappear and the snake escapes. So these strange things happen to him, but this is his ordinary world. Then we get the inciting incident. This is what triggers the story for your characters. Again, looking at Harry Potter, the inciting incident is the arrival of the letters from Hogwarts, which really is going to introduce him into this whole new world that he is going to enter. Act 2, again, is that whole middle rising action section. And you can see, again, it looks like this really big, daunting block. It's quite a large chunk of your story. And then you've got Act 3, which is the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Again, this is, it's nice to have this outline, but what I want to do is break it down even further. And I have got 15 beats that I'm going to talk through with you. So this is where I highly recommend, if you've got pen and paper, just to take note of the 15 beats. Because I just feel that if you want to really get that full emotional reaction and take the reader on this emotional journey, you want to do more than just have an Act 1, an Act 2, and an Act 3. Okay, so far this is all pretty easy. This is all pretty standard. You probably, as I say, learned this in high school. So we all get that there has to be a setup period at the beginning. There needs to be an inciting incident. We have rising action to a climax. And then after the climax, everything is resolved.